Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making another tier list, this time from Carthage's unit roster in Rome Total War, and it applies especially to the original Rome Total War, but also to a quite higher degree to Remastered version as well. There are some slight changes which a bit affect the results, but I will come back to them when the unit in question is being scrutinized. This tier list based on campaign setting, also my tests in how good this series affect the results. So in addition to the unit's fighting capabilities, also the requirements and unit costs and upkeeps are taken into account. But without further ado, let's begin. First we have cavalry units, and as the first cavalry unit, I think actually in fights perhaps the best unit in the entire game. Armored elephants. Of course, there are downsides. The unit takes ages to train, it's expensive to maintain, but overall it's really good. And yeah, in battle the best unit if you manage to get them. However, that manage to get them is kind of a key here, and because of that I will give them only A tier. Carthage has nice access to elephants, so getting elephants per se is not a problem, but getting to the highest tier stables can be a pain, and it will be quite costly pain as well. So the requirements lower these units' effectiveness to A tier, in my opinion. Even though it's clearly the best unit in the game, if one considers one unit and the enemy is not bringing incendiary picks. Then we have early bodyguard. I mean, Carthage does have relatively strong cavalry roster, especially if one considers the elephants. But in the early game, I think bodyguard is rather useful for every faction, and Carthage is no exception. But because it has some rather good cavalry units as well, they don't rely on bodyguards that much, and I think because of that the early bodyguard only gets a place in A tier. Then we have late bodyguard, and I guess late bodyguard being late in different sense makes kind of sense. So in my opinion this is not much of an improvement for the early bodyguard. I mean, it loses the shield, making it more vulnerable to arrows. The stats are not that great. So in battle, I mean, I would be rather cautious in using these, because there are quite a bit better bodyguards, and of course if you lose the general then you lose the entire unit. And I was originally thinking giving this unit A tier, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm considering even giving it strong B. But well, the unit replenishment as for any general's bodyguard is nice, so perhaps A tier at least for now. Then we have elephants, basic elephants. Practically in terms of settlements they are tier 3 unit, tier 2 stables required, and they are the easiest elephant to get. Of course in battle they are not nearly as good as the war elephants or armored elephants. And in my experience these basic elephants have the highest risk of running amok, and that's always nasty because then you may need to kill them yourself, and as the unit takes 2 turns to train and it's on the more expensive side, that will hurt quite a bit. And of course if you don't do that they may trample your army, and if you do it too late they may trample your army as well. So kind of a double-edged sword here. But still I think the unit, if properly used and protected from flaming missiles mostly, it can do rather well in disrupting enemy formations and thus paving way for other cavalry units, or even some infantry units to run into the gaps and begin to take down the enemy infantry. So the unit is by no means completely useless, but I think still perhaps in B tier, somewhere around here. On the lower end of B tier, that is. Then we have Long Shield Cavalry, and I think this is one of the better, if not the best cavalry unit, horse cavalry unit that is, in Carthaginian roster. I mean, it's cheap, it's easy to get, it's considered as light cavalry. If I remember correctly, it's slightly faster than, for example, heavy cavalry, so you can outrun cataphracts with it. And yeah, overall it's surprisingly efficient in battles, as my current Spanish campaign demonstrates. So, and it's a tier 3 unit in city requirement terms, so relatively easy to access, and I think I will give it strong A tier. Because of the ease of access, low requirements, it's relatively cheap, and in my opinion it can punch above its class rather nicely, so A+. Then we have Round Shield Cavalry, and yeah, whereas Long Shield Cavalries are nice, I mean, I will use these guys if I don't get any better, so I mean, they can do rather okay running down fleeing enemy troops, even hitting some of the missile troops, though higher tier missile units may actually be able to break these guys, so yeah. And if you hit, for example, armored hoplites from the rear, at least I'm not convinced at all that the armored hoplites will rout, but it's quite a bit more often that the Round Shield Cavalry will rout eventually. So I'm kind of considering between weak B, strong C, and I think I will give these strong C. And then the final horse cavalry unit of Carthage, Sacred Band Cavalry, the only heavy horse cavalry they have available, and it requires tier 5 stables, so highest tier stables. And from those stables you can also get armored war elephants, or armored elephants. And I mean, they have decent long shield cavalry, and I mean, because they have long shield cavalry and they have war elephants and armored war elephants, Sacred Band Cavalry is kind of obsolete. I know that it's rather widely used in multiplayer, but still, I think in campaign setting this unit deserves a place in D tier, or rather it doesn't deserve a place any higher than D tier because it's kind of obsolete. You can, if you want to hit hard, you get elephants. If you want to use cavalry speed, then you get long shield cavalry, and there is just no place for Sacred Bands. They are too squishy, they don't hit hard enough, and so on and so forth, so D tier for me. Then we have war elephants, and I have to admit that during my playthrough where I beat the game without suffering any casualties, war elephants were the unit I used most and the unit I fell in love with clearly in that playthrough. I think armored war elephant is not that much better than war elephants, and these guys really pack a punch. They have archers on top of them, so you can use them kind of a missile cavalry, which actually no enemy cavalry wants to engage, because at least in melee, because these guys will just trample them. Oh, of course the same goes for armored elephants as well, but I mean, the requirements for war elephants is one tier lower. Of course, the training time is long, the unit is pricey, but I think the ease of access for these guys makes it stand out for its benefit, and thus it deserves a place in S tier, in my books. Then let's move to infantry roster. First we have Iberian infantry. I mean, for tier 2 infantry, regarding Spain roster, I asked is there any worse tier 2 infantry. Well, I got a response that Hillmen might actually be. I think you are correct, but that does not remedy this unit. I mean, it still deserves a place only in C tier, in my opinion. in Remastered, the unit gets a slight buff, but in my opinion, still it's rather bad unit. That slight buff does not really improve its performance. So even in Rome Remastered, I would give it C tier. Perhaps, I don't know. I think I would even put Round Shield Cavalry in Remastered as well over Iberian Infantry. So these guys apparently don't benefit getting horses under them at all. Then we have Libyan Spearmen. And this is rather interesting unit, because it was quite nicely buffed in Remastered. Well, perhaps it's a bit more pricier, but I mean, it can rather stand toe-to-toe with Triarii in Remastered. And if one considers that it's one tier lower unit, then, I mean, that's quite impressive. Then again, versus Infantry, Triarii are trash, and versus Infantry, even buffed Libyan Spearmen are trash. So, I mean, they are good if you use them against Cavalry. But that means that their use is limited. And of course, if you can get higher tier units, then those units, Poeni Infantry and Sacred Band, can do rather well against Cavalry as well, so these guys become obsolete. So the window for these units is rather limited, as well as the usability in battle for these units is rather limited. So, I mean, overall, I think in original game I would give them low C tier. In the Remastered, because of the buff, I think they might rise to high C, low B, perhaps the lowest end of B, but overall I think I will just give them a solid C. I think that's a bit of a compromise for that original game and Remastered. Perhaps the only good use for them is that you can kind of make a solid line, and if the enemy just doesn't kill them too early, then you can hit the enemy in the rear with Long Shield Cavalry and thus achieve something in the battle. But otherwise, I think the unit is too niche to be actually any better than C tier. Then we have Peasants. Perhaps this is once again a bit controversial, but in my opinion, clearly S tier. Because Carthage can get huge cities, actually quite early on, and in some cases maintaining the public order can be an issue. And of course, as Carthage, because your best units are at least tier 4 units quite often, okay, excluding Long Shield Cavalry, you need to buff your settlements, you need to increase the size, and moving population from one settlement to another, that's one of the job of Peasants, so that's really useful for Carthage as well. And of course there is that maintaining public order, especially far reaches from the capital, if you have conquered and when you have conquered bigger cities. So they are mainly for maintaining public order and, in the early game, moving population most likely to Carthage herself, so you can get access or gain access to those better higher tier units. But of course in battle they are just horrible. Perhaps they can provide some value in city centers, but that's pretty much it. Then we have Poeni Infantry. I mean, the unit is solid. If it were only tier 4 infantry Carthage gets, I think I would give it A. But Carthage can get quite a bit better tier 4 infantry than Poeni Infantry, so that lowest kind of makes this unit a bit obsolete. Of course, it's nice that when you capture a settlement, and if there are tier 4 barracks, in terms of city levels, then you can replenish these troops and train them and so on and so forth. So that's nice. That's clearly a bonus for these guys. But and in battle they are solid enough. I mean, phalanx units with this much armor and relatively decent damage can do rather well. So they are really a solid infantry. But I think I will only give them B because of Sacred Band, which is also tier 4 unit and is significantly better than Pawnee Infantry. Actually, Sacred Band is the second best phalanx in all of the game, and in some situations actually better than Spartan hoplites. So these are kind of armored hoplites with some extra armor or extra stats. So the only minus for these guys is that they take 2 turns to train. And the requirements are actually quite nice. So tier 4 Temple of Baal, which of course makes retraining these units a bit more difficult, because you need to build that Temple of Baal, for example, in Northern Europe if you are doing conquest there. But at the same time, the Temple of Baal provides plus 20% to happiness and plus 20% to law. So that's basically the best temple that Carthage has. You will be building those Temple of Baals in any case in the settlements you capture, most likely. So you kind of get this unit for free in the bigger settlements. There are no requirements. And at least, well, I don't know you guys, but at least I quite rarely go to any other temple than Temple of Baal with Carthage. So I think the unit clearly deserves a place in S tier. Not perhaps quite as good as War Elephants in my books, but I may be a bit biased because these units allowed me to play that Deathless campaign in Rome. So yeah, clearly S tier unit. And the reason why Pawnee Infantry only gets B tier. If there was no Sacred Band, Pawnee Infantry would be in A tier. Then let's move onwards. We have Town Watch, and once again, no matter the faction, Town Watch is just the worst infantry in the game. I mean, they cost quite a bit more than peasants, the upkeep is higher, or actually is it? I'm not sure. But the unit costs more, it has higher requirements, and actually in battle it performs worse. And yeah, so really unreliable. Perhaps you can find some use of this unit against light cavalry. That might actually work out, but overall I think D tier unit, no matter the faction. I don't like them. I never make them unless I just have to. If I have anything else I can make, then perhaps Town Watch, but still, the unit is trash. Period. Then let's move to missile units, and perhaps we could include siege units here as well. And as you can see, the Carthaginian roster regarding these units is rather slim. First we have Peltasts, and yeah, I mean, I don't like javelin units. I have said it many times before, and perhaps I will say it sometimes in the future as well. I don't like the low number of missiles, and since Carthage is unlikely to face any factions with elephants, so that they don't have their own elephants in the field, I don't see a good reason to train these units. So C tier, they can do okay-ish in some situations, but they will be cut down by cavalry. They have limited number of missiles, they have limited range. So yeah, I mean, instead of training these guys, you should focus on leveling up the city so you can get at least long shield cavalry or Pawnee Infantry or Sacred Bands or Elephants or something like that. So not really worth it. I think I would take round shield cavalry or Iberian Infantry over skirmishers in almost any situation. And to make things worse for skirmishers, Carthage also has access to quite a variety of mercenaries, those Libyan mercenaries, and then Balearic slingers, and then there were those skirmisher cavalry mercenaries, were they Numidian mercenaries or whatever they were. So, I mean, in my opinion, as a Carthage, you should completely ignore the missile units building ranges, building chain, because stables, even barracks, but especially stables combined with Temple of Baal will serve you the best, in my opinion. Then we have slingers, actually tier 3 unit. If I remember correctly, some factions get slingers as tier 2 unit. I mean, the unit is significantly better than those peltasts in my opinion, but still slingers for tier 3 is just, I mean, bad. Because other factions get chosen archer warbands for tier 3, Romans get archer auxilia, and these guys are completely outclassed. You can get Balearic slingers as mercenaries as turn 1, and they are significantly better than these guys. So these guys will be run down by cavalry. The bonus is that they do have a nice amount of missiles and the range is okay-ish, though if I remember correctly a bit smaller range than with archers. So there is a disadvantage there as well. So I think I will give them C tier, but once again I will emphasize that you shouldn't go to ranges building chain as Carthage. You shouldn't spend money on it. Instead, just train that cavalry and infantry and hire the mercenaries, because the mercenary units are just better than these. Then we have siege weapons. First we have heavy onagers. I mean, if you want to go to highest tier ranges for this unit, then, I mean, okay, you can do it, but is it wise? I doubt that. But of course I have to admit that I'm biased against siege weapons. They slow down the movement speed in campaign maps. Of course, flaming ammo hitting the enemy phalanx looks nice and does decent damage. And you can knock down walls with these, so they might have some limited use, but I mean, spending, I don't know, almost 20 turns to make the building chain this far, and spending that almost 20,000 denarii before you can even recruit these, it's just, I mean, this is not Sparta, this is madness if you want to make these. Just to want to make these, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't like siege weapons at all, so perhaps I'm biased there. I will give them D tier, perhaps no surprise there. And then we have onagers. They only require tier 4 ranges building, so that's some improvement over heavy onagers, but still there is the same, they slow down the army movement speed. They can do rather nicely in battle if one can hit rather dense enemy formations with these. So if the enemy is tightly packed, then the value of onagers, both variants, increases. And of course you can knock down walls, but then again you need to repair those walls when you capture the settlement, so that will incur some additional costs. I was originally thinking that I would give these guys a low C tier, but after my raging against heavy onagers, perhaps I need to put them into D tier as well. Lowest C or perhaps strongest D. Let's put them here. And if some of you guys just love to play with onagers, feel free to complain about this tier list. I can see that we have different playstyles and so on and so forth, but at least I don't like siege weapons. I guess I have made it that plain before. But yeah, here is my tier list of Carthage's unit roster. Do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and also consider becoming a channel member. You get some nice emojis for the comments, and you have more to say, or rather more emphasis in your say about the future unit tests and future campaigns and so on and so forth. And special thanks to current channel member Napoleon Complex, your support is greatly treasured. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.